They waited years for a child. When one finally came, they thought their tears were over. But then, the housemaid walked away with the baby. What happened next changed everything. Judith was only 24 years old when she was sent to the city to work for a wealthy couple, together with her brother Michael. Judith was to work as a maid, while Michael would help with errands and odd jobs around the house. It was not the life Judith had imagined for herself. She had always dreamed of going to school to study nursing. But her Aunt Ada gave her only two choices: get married immediately or go to the city to work and support the family. Judith did not want to marry early. She believed she would one day meet her soulmate. However, her aunt kept pressuring her and even stopped giving her food until she finally agreed to go to the city and work as a maid. When Judith arrived at the large mansion, she expected a hard life. She did not expect kindness from her wealthy employers, Linda and Mr. Maxwell. But to her surprise, they welcomed her warmly. Instead of being given a small, uncomfortable room, Judith was offered a beautiful room to share with Michael. She ate the same food as her employers and received designer clothes and gifts from Linda. Linda was especially fond of her and often said, "We see you and Michael as part of our family." One evening, after Judith had finished her chores and was heading to bed, Linda called her into the living room. "Judith," Linda said softly, "please sit down." Judith obeyed, her heart pounding with unease. "There is something we need to tell you," Linda continued. "Your aunt was not completely honest with you about the reason you were sent here." Judith's breath caught. Deep down, she had always felt something was wrong. "What do you mean, madam?" she asked quietly. "We paid your aunt a large sum of money," Linda said gently, "not for you to work as a maid. She sent you to us to help us have a child." The words hit Judith like a blow. With the little knowledge she had from secondary school biology, she understood immediately. A surrogate. I don't understand," Judith whispered, her voice shaking. Linda sat beside her, her face filled with pain and sincerity. "Mr. Maxwell and I have difficulty having children," she said. "It has been a deep sorrow in our lives. Your aunt suggested this arrangement. We didn't want to force you, which is why we waited to tell you." Tears filled Judith's eyes, shock, betrayal, and heartbreak all at once. She sold me," Judith said, her voice breaking. "Yes," Linda replied sadly. "And we are ready to pay you a large amount of money, enough to secure a better future for you and Michael. Much more than you could ever earn as a maid." That night, Judith could barely sleep. She hated her aunt for selling her. But when she thought of Michael's future, his education, his dreams, her heart softened. Linda and Mr. Maxwell had treated her with kindness and dignity. Maybe helping them was the right thing to do. The next morning, Judith went to see Linda. "I accept," she said quietly, "but on one condition, that I will be allowed to see the children grow up, even if I continue working here for the rest of my life." Linda nodded immediately, tears shining in her eyes. "That is exactly what we want," she said. "We want you to be part of their lives. We want them to know you." The next day, arrangements were made swiftly. Dr. Toju, the family doctor, carried out the procedure privately in the mansion. Days turned into weeks, and soon Judith was confirmed pregnant. Linda and Mr. Maxwell treated her with great care. Judith was given nutritious meals, a comfortable room, and was relieved of all heavy duties. As the months progressed, with every kick and every movement, Judith formed a deep emotional bond with the baby growing inside her. Meanwhile, Linda played her role perfectly. She wore a growing prosthetic pregnancy bump and spoke confidently about morning sickness, cravings, and exhaustion whenever curious friends and relatives asked questions. 9 months later, Judith went into labor. The process was long and painful. She drifted in and out of consciousness as the pain overwhelmed her. Finally, inside the quiet, sterile private hospital, she gave birth. Exhausted but filled with a strange sense of fulfillment, Judith closed her eyes, longing to hold the child she had carried for 9 months. When she finally woke up, her arms felt painfully empty. The baby was not there. Panic surged through her. "The baby," she whispered weakly. "Where is my baby?" The door opened, and Mr. Maxwell walked in. His face was calm, almost cold. "Here's with Linda," he said flatly. "Please," Judith begged, tears streaming down her face. "Let me see him just once. Let me hold my child." Mr. Maxwell shook his head firmly. "That won't be possible, Judith. Linda is taking care of him. It's better this way, to make everything appear legitimate. The hospital bills have been settled. Focus on your recovery." And with that, he left. Judith lay there alone, drowning in grief and the unbearable emptiness in her arms. Days passed slowly. Linda never came to visit. Mr. Maxwell never returned. Only Michael, his young face filled with worry, sat beside her bed, offering silent comfort. Driven by an overwhelming desire to see her child, Judith forced herself to recover quickly. Soon, she was discharged. Michael helped her out of the hospital, and they took a taxi back to the mansion. But what awaited them crushed every remaining hope. Their belongings were dumped carelessly outside the gate. Linda stood at the doorway, holding a small bag of money. Her face was cold and resolute. "The contract is complete, Judith," Linda said emotionlessly. "Here is the rest of your payment." She tossed the bag toward Judith, who barely caught it. "But you promised." Judith cried, her voice breaking. "You said I would see them grow. You said I would be part of their lives." Linda's eyes hardened. "Circumstances change," she said coldly. "You have your money. I have my child." Then she gestured to two bodyguards who stepped forward. "Escort them off my property." "No, please, Ma," Judith pleaded desperately. "Just let me see him once." Her cries were ignored. Rough hands grabbed Judith and Michael and threw them out of the compound. Michael wrapped his arms around his sister protectively. They had nowhere to go. They could not return to the village after what their aunt had done. Their only option was to rent a small apartment and survive, at least for now. Inside the mansion, Mr. Maxwell spoke sharply to Linda. "I told you this was a bad idea," he said coldly. "Using a village girl was a mistake. We should have hired someone through an agency. Now she's foolishly expecting us to accommodate her after delivery. She even wants to act like the child's mother." He took a slow sip of his coffee. Linda scoffed. "No, to Maxwell. That's where you're wrong. Judith was perfect. Pure, innocent, and most importantly, naive. She will cry and rant for a while, and then it will end. She has no one to support her. No money. No power." She smirked. "We are untouchable." Mr. Maxwell frowned slightly. "Still, we need to be careful. Do not underestimate her just because she's poor and helpless." Linda nodded confidently. "She's harmless." Meanwhile, in their small apartment, Judith sat on the edge of a worn-out sofa, tears still flowing down her face. The bag of money lay untouched beside her. Her eyes stared into empty space as her mind replayed memories of her pregnancy, the gentle kicks, the tiny movements, the dreams she had imagined for her child. Michael sat beside her, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, his face filled with concern. "Sis," he said softly, "try to rest. You need to regain your strength so we can move forward. Maybe we can go to another city." Judith shook her head slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "My son is here, Michael," she whispered. "In this city. And I can't even see him. I don't even know what he looks like." "Is not ours," Michael said gently, his voice carrying wisdom beyond his age. "He was never yours. You were only helping them." "No." Judith cried, her voice breaking with emotion. "That child was inside me. I felt him. He is part of me. And Linda, I don't trust her. I don't believe she will love him the way a real mother should." She wiped her tears and lifted her head. "I'm not leaving this place until I see my son. At least once." Night turned into day, and Judith remained trapped in grief. She barely ate, barely spoke. Her days passed in silence, her thoughts consumed by the baby she had carried but was now forbidden to know. Michael tried to comfort her, but his words seemed powerless against her pain. One afternoon, unable to bear the weight of her sorrow any longer, Judith found herself wandering aimlessly through the city streets. Without realizing it, her feet led her back to the familiar gates of Mr. Maxwell and Linda's house. The gate was unlocked. The usually stern guard was nowhere in sight. An unsettling silence filled the compound. Hesitantly, Judith pushed the gate open and walked slowly up the long driveway. She peered through a window into the living room. And there, lying alone on a large rug, was the baby, a tiny boy. His cries echoed through the quiet house. From somewhere inside, Judith heard Linda's voice, light, cheerful, filled with laughter. It sounded like she was on a video call. Her happy tone clashed painfully with the baby's desperate cries. Judith's heart clenched. How could she leave him alone like this? A fierce, protective instinct surged through her. Without thinking, driven by desperation and love, Judith slipped through the unlocked door, lifted the crying baby into her arms, and ran back into the city streets. Back in their small apartment, Michael froze in shock as Judith stood there, cradling the now sleeping infant. "Judith," he whispered in panic. "What have you done? They'll call the police. They'll say you kidnapped him." Fear gripped Judith, but the warmth of the baby in her arms gave her strength. "I couldn't leave him there," she said softly. "He was all alone, crying." "We have to leave now," Michael said urgently. Without delay, they packed their few belongings, their hearts pounding with fear and desperate hope. They boarded a bus to another part of the city, disappearing into the unknown. Back at the mansion, Mr. Maxwell returned from work. The silence in the house struck him immediately. It was unusual. "Linda," he called, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. He found her still deeply engaged in a live stream. "Where's the baby?" he asked sharply. Linda looked up, confused. "The baby? He should be in the living room." "He's not there," Mr. Maxwell snapped. "Don't tell me you didn't check on him for hours." Linda's face drained of color. "Instead of blaming me, let's find him," she said quickly. "Maybe one of the workers has him." A frantic search followed. The staff were questioned. The security guards were interrogated. Every room was checked. The baby was nowhere to be found. Panic set in. They called the police, but Mr. Maxwell, fully aware of the scandal this could cause, insisted on keeping the report vague. There was no mention of Judith, no mention of surrogacy. Alongside the police report, they launched their own private investigation. They had money. They had influence. They had power. But the baby, and Judith, had vanished without a trace. Weeks turned into months. The absence of a baby in the mansion began to raise questions among their friends and social circle. To silence the growing suspicion, Linda, always quick-thinking, suggested they adopt a son. Mr. Maxwell was furious, but in the end, he agreed. 5 years passed, each day marked by hard work and unwavering devotion. Their small apartment, though modest, was filled with warmth, laughter, and life. Charles, now a bright and curious 5-year-old boy, adored his mother. His small hands were always eager to help in the restaurant, and his innocent chatter filled their days with joy. One afternoon, Judith was walking home from school hand in hand with Charles when she suddenly felt as though someone was watching her. "Mommy, are you okay?" Charles asked, looking up at her. Judith paused and glanced around but saw no one. "I'm fine, my love," she said with a gentle smile. "Let's go. Your Uncle Michael must be waiting for us." Unknown to her, Mr. Maxwell sat frozen inside his car a short distance away. He slowly lowered the window, his heart pounding as he stared at the building Judith had just entered. His hands clenched tightly into fists. "That witch," he muttered bitterly. When Mr. Maxwell arrived home, he stormed into the mansion, his anger barely contained. "What's wrong with you?" Linda asked, walking toward him. "Why are you so angry?" "I saw her today," he said sharply. "On my way to the next town." Linda stiffened. "Saw who?" "Judith," he replied. "She was holding my son, the child I haven't seen for 5 years." Linda's calm expression faltered. A flicker of unease crossed her face. "Judith," she said carefully. "That's impossible." "It was her," Mr. Maxwell snapped. "And the boy, about 5 years old, was with her." The unspoken truth hung heavily between them. Linda's eyes narrowed, a cold edge creeping into her gaze. "Don't be so certain," she said. "You could have mistaken her for someone else." Mr. Maxwell turned toward her, his eyes burning with fury. "There was no mistake," he said firmly. "That was Judith. And that boy is my son. He has my features. I saw it clearly." He took a sharp breath. "And this will be the last time that foolish girl keeps me away from my son." Don't act rashly, Linda warned, her voice sharp, fear slipping through her composure. We can't afford any mistakes now. The following morning, the normality of Judith's quiet life was shattered in the most heartbreaking way. Needing fresh ingredients for a restaurant, Judith left Charles happily building a tower of blocks in their small living room. She promised to return quickly. Michael had already left earlier for the restaurant. As Judith stepped out, the front door, left slightly ajar, creaked open softly. Moments later, Mr. Maxwell slipped inside the apartment, his heart pounding with a desperate need to confirm the suspicion tormenting him. Charles, deeply focused on his game, didn't notice the intrusion until he looked up and saw a tall, unfamiliar man standing before him. "Hello, who are you?" the little boy asked cautiously. "I'm your dad," Mr. Maxwell replied, forcing calm into his voice. "And I'm also a friend of your mom. She sent me to come get you." Charles shook his head firmly. "You're lying," he said. "I don't have a father, and my mom told me never to talk to strangers." A flicker of fear crossed his innocent face. Mr. Maxwell's jaw tightened. "Smart boy," he muttered. "But we have to go now." In one swift motion, he scooped the child into his arms. Charles cried out in shock and fear. Just then, Judith returned from the market. "Mommy." Judith froze. Her eyes widened in horror as she saw Charles inside a moving car she knew too well. Mr. Maxwell's car. Without doubt. The bag slipped from her hands, fruits and vegetables scattering across the pavement. "Charles," she screamed, running after the car. "No, please. Give me back my son." She ran until her legs could no longer carry her. Desperate, she stopped a taxi and ordered the driver to follow the car. Her heart thundered in her chest. Her palms were sweaty, her breath uneven. By the time she arrived at the towering gates of Mr. Maxwell and Linda's mansion, they were tightly shut. Judith pounded the cold iron gates, screaming Charles' name. The gatekeeper stood motionless, refusing to open. The sky suddenly darkened, and heavy rain poured down, soaking Judith completely. Still, she did not move. Her eyes remained fixed on the silent mansion. Then Linda emerged, holding a large black umbrella. Her face was hard, her voice sharp with venom. "You have the audacity to show your face after what you did," Linda said coldly. "If you don't leave immediately, I will call the police. I'll have you arrested for harassment, trespassing, and attempting to kidnap my son." "I just want to see him," Judith pleaded, her voice breaking. "Please, just let me know he's okay." Linda laughed cruelly. "Are you really that stupid?" she snapped. "Is that child yours in any way? Get out of here now. I've been far too soft with you." She raised her phone. "I'm calling the police." Judith's heart skipped. She knew the truth. She had no legal rights to Charles. No biological claim that would protect her. Slowly, defeated, she turned away from the gate. Charles' terrified cries echoed in her ears. The city lights blurred through her tears as she wandered aimlessly through the rain. Her chest felt hollow, an endless, aching void. Lost in grief, she didn't notice the approaching car. A sudden impact. The car slammed into her. A flash of unbearable pain. Then darkness. A young black man in his 30s jumped out of the vehicle in horror, rushing toward her. Judith's lips moved weakly. "My child. Charles." Her breath caught. And then, the darkness claimed her. The next morning, Judith woke up to the sterile smell of disinfectant and the steady beeping of machines. She was in a hospital room. She tried to sit up, but a firm hand gently pressed her back down. "You need to rest," a concerned voice said. The young man from the previous night stood beside her bed, his face filled with worry. "My name is Peter," he said softly. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you in time. But the doctor says you'll be fine, no serious damage." Judith stared blankly at the ceiling. Her mind focused on only one thing: Charles. Ignoring Peter's protests, she struggled to pull herself free from the tubes and wires. "I have to go," she whispered hoarsely. "My son." "You need to recover first," Peter said, gently holding her hands to stop her. "I don't have time for that." Judith cried, tears spilling over. "Please." Peter sighed helplessly and finally released her. Judith ran out of the hospital. She made her way straight to Mr. Maxwell and Linda's mansion. The gatekeeper was still there, cold, unmoving. "Please," she begged, pounding the locked gate. "Just let me see Charles. I need to see my son." The front door opened. Linda stepped out, a cruel smile twisting her lips. Without saying a word, she grabbed a nearby garden hose and sprayed Judith with a rush of cold water. The shock stole her breath. "Next time," Linda said sharply, "I'll make sure it's hot water." "Foolish girl," she spat, before turning and walking back inside. Moments later, Michael rushed toward her. "Judith, what are you doing here?" he exclaimed. "I came yesterday after hearing what happened, but I couldn't find you." "They took him again," Judith sobbed. "Michael, my son." She collapsed into his arms, her body shaking from cold and grief. "We'll fight another day," Michael said gently. "Let's get you somewhere dry first." As he tried to lead her away, a car pulled up behind them. It was Peter. He stepped out quickly, worry written on his face. "Please," he said, "let me drive you both." "You don't have to," Judith said weakly, turning away. Peter followed. "At least let me make up for what happened. You can stay at my place while you figure out your next step." Judith hesitated, but she had nowhere else to go. Eventually, she nodded. Peter drove them to a large mansion. After showing them the guest room, he said, "Please make yourselves comfortable. If you need anything at all, just ask." "Thank you, sir," Michael replied warmly. Peter nodded and glanced at Judith, noticing how broken she looked, before quietly excusing himself. That night, after Michael had fallen asleep, Judith sat on the edge of the bed, unable to rest. She clutched one of Charles' small shirts, breathing in its faint scent, a painful reminder of everything she had lost. Later, not wanting to disturb Michael, she wandered into the vast garden. Her steps were slow, her thoughts heavy. "Oh God," she whispered through tears, pressing the shirt to her chest. "Please. I just want my son back." From the window of his study, Peter watched her silently. His heart ached as he saw her standing alone in the darkness. How could someone so innocent carry so much pain? The next morning, Peter prepared a simple breakfast and called for both Judith and Michael. Michael, hungry and eager, hurried straight to the dining table. "I'm not hungry," Judith said softly, turning to go back to the room. Peter smiled gently. "I knew you'd say that, but I came prepared. I'm willing to help you with your son, but first, you must eat." Judith frowned. "How would you help me? And why would you even bother?" "That's something you'll find out," Peter replied calmly. "But my condition is simple. Take a bite. You wouldn't want Charles to return and find his mother malnourished." At the sound of her son's name, Judith slowly sat down and began taking small bites. Michael finished his meal and excused himself to the guest room. "Judith," Peter called gently. She didn't respond. She was pushing food around her plate, lost in thought. "I want to help you," Peter continued. "If you allow me. I'm a lawyer." Judith looked up at him, her eyes hollow. "There's nothing anyone can do," she said quietly. "The contract was clear." "Perhaps," Peter replied. "But there may be a loophole. And if there's even the slightest chance that you're Charles's biological mother, that changes everything." Judith smiled bitterly. "I wish I were. I'd thank God forever if that were true. But it isn't. I only carried him as a surrogate." Peter folded his hands. "We can never be completely sure. That's why we investigate. Just have a little hope." Judith nodded slowly. Deep down, she believed it was a lost battle, but hope was all she had left. She gave Peter every detail she could remember, and he immediately began working on her case. Meanwhile, back at the grand mansion, tension hung heavily around the dining table. "I don't want to eat," Charles cried, pushing his plate away. "I want my mummy." "I know you miss her," Kenneth, the adopted child, said gently, placing a hand on his arm. "Just try to see us as your family for now, until she comes back." Before the comfort could settle, Linda's sharp voice cut through the room. "Starve for all I care, you ungrateful brat," she snapped. "I'm tired of your whining, and that stupid woman you call your mother." "My mom is not stupid," Charles said defiantly, lifting his chin. "You're the wicked one." Linda's face twisted with rage as she grabbed the boy, raising her hand to spank him. "Linda." Mr. Maxwell's voice thundered from the doorway. "What in God's name do you think you're doing to my son?" Linda flinched but stood her ground. He was being disrespectful. He needs to understand that I'm his new mother now. Mr. Maxwell pulled Charles into his arms, holding the trembling boy close. He stared at Linda with a cold fury she had never seen before. "The next time you raise your voice at my son," he said slowly, "you'll see a side of me you never knew existed." "My son?" Linda asked in disbelief. "You're threatening me because of that boy?" "That boy is my son," Mr. Maxwell snapped. "For someone who could not have a child because her eggs were bad, you should have learned to value and protect children." The words landed like a slap. Linda froze. Tears streamed down her face as she turned and ran out of the dining room, locking herself in the bedroom. Humiliation and pain overwhelmed her. Mr. Maxwell's words had reopened the deepest wound, her inability to conceive. Since Charles arrived, everything had changed. Mr. Maxwell's attention shifted. His affection for Charles eclipsed what he once gave her and Kenneth. Clenching her fists, she sobbed bitterly. "That stubborn boy," she muttered through tears. "Just like his mother. You exist only to cause me pain." And she continued crying. Across town, inside Peter's house, the afternoon was quiet and heavy with silence. Michael had gone to the restaurant, and Peter was at work. Judith was alone. She tried to keep herself busy by washing dishes, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Charles. Just one last time, she wanted to see how he was doing, before laying low and following the careful plan Peter had in mind. Before she realized it, Judith found herself standing in front of Mr. Maxwell's mansion. Luck was on her side. The gatekeeper was nowhere to be seen. Her heart pounding with fear and hope, she slipped inside. Peering through the kitchen window, she froze. Charles was there. He was washing dishes, his small shoulders slumped, his face filled with sadness. Then he looked up. His eyes widened in shock, then lit up with joy. "Mommy," he cried, running toward her. He wrapped his arms tightly around her legs. Judith dropped to her knees, cupping his little face in her hands as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Oh, my sweet boy," she whispered. "How are you? Are they treating you well? Did you sleep well? Have you eaten?" Charles nodded. "Uncle Maxwell always takes care of me. He's kind to me." "My child," Judith whispered, pulling him into a tight hug. "I want to come with you, Mommy," Charles said softly. "I don't like it here." Judith gently held his face, forcing a sad smile. "I promise we'll be together soon," she said. "But not right now. Mommy needs to make sure that when you come back to me, no one will ever separate us again." She brushed his hair gently. "For now, you have to be strong for me. Okay." Charles nodded obediently, though his eyes were filled with sadness. "When we're together again," Judith added softly, "I'll make your favorite breakfast." "Scrambled eggs?" Charles asked excitedly. "Yes," she smiled. His face brightened. "Okay, Mommy, I'll wait for you." Then he paused, his brows furrowing in innocent confusion. "Mommy, do people own eggs?" Judith hesitated, unsure how to explain. "Yes, somehow, baby," she said gently. "Why do you ask?" "Mommy, Uncle Maxwell said Aunt Linda can't have babies because her eggs are bad," and she was very sad. A cold wave of dread washed over Judith. Her expression tightened. What else did he say? Before Charles could answer, Linda's sharp voice echoed through the house. "Charles, Charles, where is that boy?" Panic surged through Judith. "I have to go, my love," she whispered quickly, kissing his forehead. "Be brave." "I'll wait for you, Mommy," Charles said, hugging her tightly once more. Judith slipped away quietly, leaving the house as quickly as she had entered. Her heart ached as she walked away, pain mixed with a fragile sense of relief. At least for now, her son was safe. And he was doing fine. Back at the house, Peter watched Judith closely. "You seem different," he said softly. "Happier. You were gone for a long time. Did you see him?" Judith nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Yes. He looked sad, but he's still my Charles." Her smile faded. "I just don't know how long he can hold on." "You'll be reunited with him soon," Peter said firmly. "That's a promise." Judith looked at him, hope flickering in her eyes. "Peter," she said gently. He met her gaze. "There's something Charles mentioned earlier. He said Mr. Maxwell and Linda had an argument, and Mr. Maxwell said Linda didn't have eggs." Peter's expression changed instantly. His eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. "That wasn't a slip of the tongue," he said slowly. "And Linda's reaction confirms it." Judith frowned, confused. "But how is that possible? It was supposed to be Linda's eggs and Mr. Maxwell's sperm." "But what if it wasn't?" Peter pressed. "What if they lied?" Judith froze. "It would explain why they never had you arrested for kidnapping Charles," Peter continued. "They know that would open a door they desperately want sealed. It could also explain why Linda has been so cruel to you and to Charles." He paused, then spoke carefully. "Judith, from everything we've seen, Charles may be your biological son, not Linda's." Judith's breath caught. The thought was terrifying and thrilling. Could it be true? The bond she felt. The connection she could never explain. "We need the truth," Peter said. "We start with the doctor who performed the surrogacy." A fragile seed of hope began to grow in Judith's heart, battling years of forced acceptance. "Yes," she whispered, her eyes filling with determination. "If he's truly my son, I'll fight for him with everything I have." The next day, Judith and Peter stood in the sterile waiting room of a clinic, the air thick with tension. Dr. Toju, the doctor who had overseen the surrogacy, stepped out. The moment he recognized Judith, his face paled. A flicker of unease crossed his eyes, something Peter noticed immediately. "How may I help you?" the doctor asked, forcing a neutral tone. "My name is Judith," she began, her voice trembling but steadying. "You remember me. I worked for Mr. Maxwell and Linda. 7 years ago, you performed a surrogacy procedure using my body." Peter stepped forward. "We need clarification, doctor. Regarding the eggs used in that procedure, were they Linda's or were they Judith's?" Dr. Toju stood abruptly, his hands shaking. "What kind of accusation is this?" he snapped. "Of course we used Mrs. Linda's eggs. That was the entire point of the procedure." Judith's heart sank. "So, Charles is not mine?" she asked softly, her voice breaking. "I understand emotional attachment in surrogacy cases," Dr. Toju said dismissively. "But biologically, the child belongs to Mr. Maxwell and Linda." Judith couldn't bear to hear more. Tears flooded her eyes as she turned and ran out of the clinic, the doctor's words echoing in her head. Peter followed quickly, catching up to her outside. "Judith, wait." She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "How could I be so foolish?" she cried. "To even hope. It was just a dream. He's not my blood." Peter pulled her into a gentle embrace. "Don't give up yet," he said quietly. Something about that doctor's reaction wasn't right. "What else could it be?" she cried, pulling away. He confirmed it. "It's over." "No," Peter said firmly. "It's not over until we know the full truth. I've dealt with lies long enough to recognize one. That doctor was hiding something. I felt it." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I promise you, I'll make him tell us everything. For now, let's get you home to rest. This isn't over." Judith nodded slowly. It wasn't over. Back at Peter's mansion, Judith remained inconsolable throughout the night. Michael, his face lined with worry, tried to comfort her. He urged her to accept the doctor's words and face reality. But for the first time, Judith refused to let go. She clung to Peter's intuition, to the uneasy feeling she had experienced during the surrogacy, and to the deep, unexplainable bond she had always felt with Charles. A fierce determination settled in her heart. She would uncover the truth, no matter how painful it was. The next morning, as Dr. Toju prepared to leave his clinic, his secretary informed him that he had visitors. He frowned, expecting another routine patient. Instead, he found Judith and Peter waiting for him, their expressions firm and unyielding. "You two again," he scoffed. "Didn't I make myself clear yesterday?" Judith suddenly dropped to her knees. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I'm begging you, sir. Just tell me the truth. Have pity on a mother, please." For a brief moment, hesitation flickered in Dr. Toju's eyes, but it vanished almost instantly. "I'm sorry," he said coldly. "I have nothing else to tell you." "Doctor told you," Peter said calmly, stepping forward. "I don't believe we were properly introduced. I'm attorney Peter." The doctor stiffened. "We can do this the easy way," Peter continued evenly, "or the hard way. The choice is yours." Dr. Toju's composure cracked. "Are you threatening me?" he asked, his voice trembling as his eyes darted between them. "Consider it an informed suggestion," Peter replied, his gaze unwavering. "Even if you maintain your story today, we will uncover the truth. A simple DNA test would be enough. And you know what the implications are for your career. If this comes out, your license would be revoked." Peter leaned closer, lowering his voice. "But if you cooperate now, you may save yourself a great deal of trouble." Dr. Toju exhaled heavily, the fight draining from him. "The egg," he stammered. "The egg used for the surrogacy, it wasn't Linda's." Judith's breath caught sharply. She grabbed Peter's arm. "Go on," Peter urged gently. "Linda couldn't conceive," the doctor confessed, his voice barely audible. "She had no viable eggs. They instructed me. They paid me a large sum to use Judith's eggs and keep it secret." Judith's knees buckled as the truth hit her like a blade. "They wanted the child to be biologically theirs in the eyes of the world," Dr. Toju continued weakly. Judith staggered backward, agony ripping through her chest. "They lied," she cried. "How could they be so cruel? How could they steal my child and strip me of my rights as a mother?" Tears streamed down her face. "They're evil." Peter quickly held her upright, his own face burning with controlled rage and grim satisfaction. "They've deceived you long enough," he said firmly. "We'll get a DNA confirmation, and then we'll take your son back." Hours later, the DNA results came back. The truth was undeniable. Charles was Judith's son. With the DNA report and Dr. Toju's signed confession in hand, Judith and Peter went straight to Mr. Maxwell and Linda's mansion. Linda was about to leave when she saw them. "Who let you into my house?" she shouted. "Where are all these useless people? Get this woman out of my sight." Before Judith could speak, Linda stepped forward and raised her hand to slap her. Judith caught her wrist firmly. Linda lost her balance and nearly fell. "Have you gone mad?" Linda screamed. "How dare you raise your hand on me?" "That doesn't even come close to the pain you and your husband caused me," Judith replied fiercely. "You lied to me. You deceived me. You took my son away. You didn't even let me hold him, no matter how much I begged." Tears streamed down her face as her body shook with rage. "How could you do this?" she cried. "How could you sleep at night knowing you stole a child from his own mother?" Linda's face drained of color. "How did you know?" she whispered in terror. "Did you really think you could hide the truth forever?" Peter asked coldly. "It's over. A formal complaint has been filed. We have enough evidence to prove that Judith is Charles's biological mother. The police are already on their way." "No!" Linda screamed. She rushed toward her car, trying to escape, but the police arrived just in time and stopped her. At that same moment, Mr. Maxwell had just returned home. He froze when he saw police officers already inside the mansion. "What is going on here?" he demanded, his voice shaking. An officer stepped forward. "Mr. Maxwell, you are under arrest for conspiracy in an illegal surrogacy arrangement and for falsifying medical records." The color drained from his face. Handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists as he was led toward Linda. "Judith, please, don't do this," Linda cried desperately as the officers dragged both her and Mr. Maxwell away. Just then, "Mommy." Charles ran toward Judith. She dropped to her knees and caught him in her arms, holding him tightly as tears of relief streamed down her face. "My child," she whispered, tears of relief and joy flowing freely. "No one will ever separate us again." Judith stood up, holding his hand. "Come, my love," she said gently. "Let's go home." Charles nodded and took a step with her, then suddenly stopped. He turned back. Kenneth stood by the doorway, tears filling his eyes. "Mommy," he said softly, with a maturity beyond his age. "Can Kenneth come with us?" Judith looked at the small, lonely boy. Her heart softened. She had fought so hard for her own child. Could she turn this one away? She smiled gently and nodded. "Come, Kenneth," she said. "Let's go home." Later, Peter organized a small house gathering to celebrate Judith's victory. Everyone was joyful, but Charles sat quietly, his usual bright energy dimmed. Judith noticed immediately. She knelt beside him and stroked his hair. "What is it, my love?" she asked softly. "You seem quiet." Charles looked up at her with innocent sincerity. "I miss Uncle Maxwell." Judith's smile faltered slightly, though she had expected this. "He was good to me," Charles continued quietly. "He read me stories and bought me that big teddy bear you didn't like." Judith pulled him into a warm hug. "I know he was kind to you," she said gently. "But sometimes people make very wrong choices, even if they seem good at times." She held his face tenderly. "What matters now is that we're together. You, me, and Uncle Michael. We are your family, and we will always be here for you." She glanced at Kenneth, who was laughing and playing with Michael, his earlier shyness gone. "And now," Judith added softly, "you have a brother too." Charles leaned into her embrace, letting out a small sigh. A faint smile returned to his face. For the first time in a long while, he felt safe. Later that evening, after Charles and Kenneth had fallen asleep, Judith found herself alone with Peter on the small balcony. The city lights sparkled quietly below them. Judith turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Peter," she said softly, "for everything. I honestly don't know what I would have done without you." Peter looked at her warmly. "Judith, you are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You would have found a way somehow. I'm just glad I was there to help." He hesitated, then stepped a little closer. "Judith, over the past few weeks, I've developed feelings for you." Judith looked at him, surprised, yet not unaware. She had been so focused on fighting for Charles that she had barely noticed the quiet care, patience, and steady support Peter had shown her all along. There was genuine kindness in his eyes, so different from the manipulation and cruelty she had once endured. "Peter," she said thoughtfully, "everything that has happened has changed my life completely. My focus right now is on Charles and Kenneth, on building a stable and happy life for them. They need me." Peter nodded, understanding. "I know," he said gently. "I would never ask you to put anything above your children. But maybe, when you're ready, you might consider giving me a chance. I'd like to be part of your life, to support you and the boys." Judith looked out at the city lights again. A quiet sense of hope stirred within her, rising through the tiredness of everything she had been through. Peter had been her anchor in her darkest moments, steady, intelligent, and kind. "Perhaps," she said softly, "perhaps in time. For now, thank you, for being my friend and my savior." Peter smiled, a genuine warmth lighting up his face. "That's more than enough for me, Judith." She turned back to the city view. One chapter of her life had ended, and another had begun, one filled with the quiet joy of motherhood, healing, and the gentle hope of a future shared with someone who truly saw her strength and cherished her heart. The scars of the past would remain. The memory of Mr. Maxwell and Linda might never completely fade. But this time, Judith was stronger, ready to fight for a brighter future, not just for herself, but for her children and the people she loved. Dear family, what lessons did you take from this story? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit the subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you never miss our latest updates. Thanks for watching. Stay blessed.